My son locked me in a room. He took my phone and ignored my pleas to call an ambulance, thinking he would get his inheritance faster. I am an old, sick father, and he is a greedy heir who only sees me as an obstacle. But 3 days later, when he entered the room, what he saw made him scream. Before continuing, please subscribe to William's Revenge Stories and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The front door felt heavier than I remembered. 2 weeks in the hospital had weakened more than just my heart. My hands trembled as I turned the key. The familiar click should have brought me comfort. Instead, it echoed like a warning. Hey guys, I'm finally home. Matthew didn't even look up from his laptop. The living room armchair, my armchair, held him as if it were his own, which I guess he believed it was. Yeah, I see. It wasn't exactly the welcome I had imagined during those long nights listening to the beep and hum of machines. Valerie came out of the kitchen, drying her hands on a dish towel, with a smile as bland as hospital coffee. Arthur, you look better. The pause said everything her words didn't. I put down my suitcase and my hospital discharge papers, scanning the room that had been mine for 37 years. The family photos on the fireplace mantel were gone. The bookshelf held different books, newer ones, arranged by color instead of by feeling. Even the old lamp my Elizabeth had bought at that flea market was gone. Where are my things? We were just cleaning, Arthur. It was getting cluttered, Valerie said, using that rehearsed tone she used to deflect uncomfortable questions. Clutter? The word tasted bitter. Those were my memories. Matthew finally looked up from the screen. Dad, we need to talk about the future of this house. The future? As if I wasn't part of it. As if the surgery had been my funeral instead of my second chance. I walked to the garage. The surgical scar pulled tight against the bandages. The familiar pain in my chest wasn't from the operation this time. It was from seeing my life packed into cardboard boxes. Tools I had used for 40 years. Photo albums. Elizabeth's recipe cards. All labeled in Valerie's neat handwriting. Arthur's things. Storage. Storage. As if I were already dead. Why is my stuff in boxes? Matthew appeared in the garage doorway, blocking my way back into the house. We thought you might be more comfortable with a different layout. A different layout? My voice cracked like old leather. This is my house, son. Actually, Dad, we've been thinking about that. He crossed his arms. A gesture that made him look like a stranger with my son's face. You're not getting any younger. The stairs are dangerous for someone in your condition. The condition he had never once asked about during my stay. Not one visit, not one call. The doctor cleared me for normal activities. The doctor doesn't live here. Matthew's tone had an edge I'd never heard before. Sharp, final, like a slamming door. We do. We. Not you. Me and Valerie. Just us. The couple who had taken over everything while I was fighting to stay alive. The evening shadows stretched across the garage floor, reaching for me like fingers. The house I had built with my own hands suddenly felt like a tomb. My son stood there looking at me with eyes that held no warmth, not recognizing the man who had taught him how to ride a bike, how to change the oil, how to be decent. I went up the stairs to my bedroom, each step a small victory over the pain in my chest. Behind me I heard the soft murmur of conversation, Matthew and Valerie discussing something in voices too low to understand. Plotting something, probably. Plotting a future that didn't include their inconvenient old father. The bedroom looked the same, at least. The same bed, the same view of the street where Henry waved to me from his porch every morning. The same family photos on the nightstand, though fewer than before. I sat down heavily on the mattress, the discharge papers crinkling in my lap. Tomorrow would be better. It had to be. Tonight was just the shock of returning home, the awkwardness of readjustment. Families needed time to heal, just like hearts. But as I listened to the sounds downstairs, the clinking of dishes, the low murmur of the TV, the comfortable routine of people who belonged in this place, I felt more alone than I had in that sterile hospital room. The house settled around me with its familiar creaks and sighs. Soon, Matthew's footsteps moved across the kitchen floor. Then they came up the stairs and passed my door without stopping. Not a good night, not an, "Do you need anything?" Just the soft click of his bedroom door shutting me out. I lay in the darkness, one hand pressed against my chest, where the surgeon had cut me open and stitched me back together. The physical healing was almost complete, but something else had broken that I wasn't sure could ever be fixed. I woke up with the feeling that someone was standing on my chest. The digital clock read 7:30 a.m., but the quality of light filtering through the blinds felt wrong, too bright, too harsh. My mouth was dry as sandpaper, and when I tried to sit up, the room tilted sideways. It wasn't the normal ache from sleeping in a weird position. It was the sharp, insistent pain Dr. Morgan had warned me about. If you experience chest pressure, shortness of breath, or sudden dizziness, do not wait. Call an ambulance immediately. I tried to reach for the glass of water on my nightstand, but my arm felt heavy as concrete. The simple act of lifting my head sent waves of nausea through me. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the morning chill. The phone. I had to reach the phone. It was on the dresser, across the room, a distance that might as well have been miles. When I tried to stand, my legs gave out, and I caught myself against the mattress, gasping. The surgical scar tightened, a reminder of how recent my chest operation had been, of how fragile the repairs truly were. Doctor said, "If it gets bad, ambulance," I whispered to the empty room, trying to remember the exact words, the precise symptoms that meant danger. This qualified. This definitely qualified. "Matthew!" My voice came out as a croak. I tried again. Louder. "Matthew! Matthew! Help me!" Silence. Then, the distant sound of coffee brewing. The morning news murmuring from the kitchen TV. Normal sounds of a normal morning for people whose hearts weren't trying to kill them. I made it halfway to the dresser before my vision went gray at the edges. The pain in my chest intensified, radiating down my left arm like fire. I grabbed the doorframe, breathing in short, desperate gasps. "Matthew!" I put everything I had into it this time, the shout tearing at my throat. Footsteps downstairs. No hurry. Then his voice, floating up from what sounded like the bottom of the stairs. "What is it, Dad? What is it?" Like I was calling about a leaky faucet, or a burned-out light bulb, as if the desperation in my voice hadn't registered at all. "I feel sick. Really sick." "Call an ambulance." Another pause. Longer this time. I leaned my back against the wall, sliding down into a sitting position on the floor, the phone still impossibly far away. My reflection in the dresser mirror showed a gray-faced old man with wild eyes, his pajamas soaked in sweat. Elizabeth would have already been dialing 911. Elizabeth would have been holding my hand, talking me through it, making sure I knew I wasn't alone. But Elizabeth was gone, and I was trapped upstairs with a son who couldn't be bothered to climb 14 steps to check on his father's medical emergency. The pain spread across my chest like spilled acid. I remembered the surgeon's words about stress on the heart, about the delicate nature of the repairs, about how fast things could go wrong in patients my age. The mortality statistics he had quoted as casually as if I were just a number in his success rate. "Matthew, please!" I called out again, but my voice was weaker now. The strength was draining out of me with every labored breath. This time I heard movement. The deliberate scrape of a chair being pushed back. The measured footsteps of someone in no rush at all. Relief washed over me. Even as the pain intensified, he was coming. Finally, he was coming. The stairs creaked under his weight, each step slow and careful. Not the hurried ascent of someone responding to an emergency, but the pace of someone fulfilling an obligation. Still, he was coming. That's what mattered. I managed to pull myself upright against the wall, trying to look less helpless than I felt. The last thing I wanted was to appear weak, even though weakness was exactly what this was. The fundamental fragility of a body that had already failed me once. "Dad." His voice carried a note of mild concern, the way you'd ask about a neighbor's sick cat. "In here," I managed to say. "Hurry." The bedroom door swung open, and Matthew filled the doorway, still in his pajamas, his hair messy from sleep. He looked at me slumped against the wall. He observed the sweat and the paleness and the obvious distress. And his expression remained completely calm. "What's wrong?" As if it wasn't obvious. As if a man didn't call for an ambulance unless he was dying. "Call 911. Quick. I feel terrible." Matthew walked into the room, his eyes scanning the scene with a strange detachment. He moved like someone assessing a situation rather than responding to an emergency. His gaze lingered on my phone. Then it shifted to me. And then back to the phone. "No, Dad. I'm not calling. The words hit me like a bucket of cold water. What are you saying? I could die. He walked past me to the dresser. He picked up my phone and slipped it into his pocket. The movement was casual, practiced, as if he'd rehearsed it. Maybe that would be for the best. The room went silent, except for my own ragged breathing. I stared at my son, my only son, the boy I had taught to throw a baseball, whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose college I had paid for, and I saw a stranger wearing his face. Matthew. The pain in my chest flared, but it felt like more than just my heart now. Something fundamental had broken that had nothing to do with arteries or surgical repairs. Your old, sick father? This house is worth $300,000, and Valerie and I have plans. He spoke in the same tone he might use to discuss the weather. Plans that don't include supporting an invalid. Invalid. The word cut deeper than any scalpel. I'm your father. My voice came out as a whisper. You're a burden. He moved toward the door with that same unhurried pace. And burdens have a way of resolving themselves. I tried to stand, to reach for him, to grab his shoulders and shake some humanity back into him. But my body betrayed me. My legs buckled. My arms were too weak to support my weight. I collapsed back against the wall, gasping. Matthew, please, I need help. He paused in the doorway, looking back with something that might have been pity, if there had been any warmth in it. No, Dad. You need to accept reality. The door closed. The lock clicked. Locked. He had locked me in. Matthew! I pounded on the door with what little strength I had left. Open the door! What are you doing? His footsteps receded down the hall, down the stairs, back to his normal morning routine, back to his coffee and his plans and his future that didn't include his inconvenient father. I slumped against the door, the pain in my chest now competing with a different kind of agony. The child I had raised, the son I had loved unconditionally, had just sentenced me to death. Not with violence or anger, but with cold calculation, with the casual cruelty of someone swatting a fly. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in. No phone, no way out, and downstairs the sounds of normal life continued. The TV, the coffee pot, the comfortable routine of people planning a future built on my grave. I pressed my ear to the door, listening for any sign of conscience, any hint that he might reconsider. Instead, I heard him talking to Valerie, his voice low and satisfied, discussing something that made her laugh. A bright, carefree sound that chilled my blood. The surgical scar on my chest burned like a brand. All those machines, all that medicine, all that careful monitoring to keep me alive, just so I could die alone, locked in my own bedroom, abandoned by the people I had trusted most. But I wasn't dead yet. And despite the pain, despite the betrayal, despite everything my body was telling me about giving up, something stubborn and furious was waking up in the part of me that had survived 68 years. 2 wars, the death of my wife, and now this. If Matthew thought I would die quietly and conveniently, he didn't know his father as well as he thought. I had survived worse than this. I would survive him. The window looked out onto Henry's house. Henry, who had lived next door for 15 years, who waved every morning, who had asked about my recovery just last week. If I could just get his attention, I crawled toward the window. Every movement was a small victory against the pain that was trying to pull me under. The glass was cool against my palm as I leaned up to see the street below. Henry's morning paper was still in his driveway. Soon he would come out to get it, coffee mug in hand, ready to start another ordinary day in an ordinary neighborhood where sons didn't lock their fathers up to die. All I had to do was survive long enough to get his attention. All I had to do was refuse to make Matthew's plan easy. The pain was real, dangerous, potentially fatal, but so was my son's betrayal. And between the two, I knew which one I was going to fight harder. The silence after his footsteps faded felt like death itself. I leaned my back against the door, sliding down until I was crumpled on the floor like dirty laundry. The carpet beneath me, Elizabeth's carpet, the one she'd picked out during our 3rd year of marriage, felt rough against my palms. How did this happen? Where's the boy I raised? The question echoed in the emptiness of my skull, bouncing off memories that no longer made sense. This was the same son who had cried when he accidentally stepped on a spider at age 7. The same boy who had hugged me so tight after his first Little League home run, I thought my ribs might crack. My chest felt like someone was tightening a vise around it. Each breath was a tiny victory against the pain radiating down my left arm. The doctor's words came back in fragments. Any sudden onset of symptoms, do not hesitate, could be fatal. Fatal? That was exactly what Matthew was counting on. My own son. Does he really want me to die? The words came out as a whisper, barely audible even to myself. I remembered teaching him to ride his bike in the driveway, right below this very window. He must have been 6, maybe 7, with that gap-toothed grin and the hair that stuck up no matter how hard his mother tried to tame it. When he finally managed those first wobbly yards on his own, he'd turn back to me with such pure joy. Did you see, Dad? Did you see me do it? I had been so proud, so incredibly proud of this boy who shared my stubborn chin and my wife's kind eyes. That boy was gone. In his place was a stranger wearing Matthew's face. A man who looked at his father and saw only an obstacle to financial freedom, a burden to be eliminated. Maybe I really did become a burden. The thought slithered in like poison, spreading through my consciousness with sickening efficiency. Had I been demanding? Difficult? When I called from the hospital, asking when they might visit, did my voice carry that needy tone that makes people want to run? When I mentioned I was lonely, did it sound like manipulation? The pain in my chest intensified, and I could no longer tell where the physical ended and the emotional began. They had merged into one massive weight, pressing down on everything I thought I knew about love, family, the basic human decency that separated us from animals. Through the window, I could hear the distant sound of a lawnmower. Someone starting their Tuesday morning in an ordinary way, life continuing as if the world hadn't just cracked open to reveal something rotten at its core. I forced myself to focus on breathing. In, out, just like the physical therapist had taught me after the surgery, counting the rhythm to keep the panic at bay. But this wasn't surgical recovery. This was survival. The window caught the morning light, casting long rectangles on the floor. From here I could see Henry's house, his tidy garden with its precise rows of vegetables. Henry, who had waved to me from his porch just last week, asking how I was feeling, if I needed anything from the store. Henry, who had no idea his neighbor was trapped in his own bedroom, left to die by his own blood. I pressed my palm flat on the floor and pushed, fighting the dizziness as I struggled to my knees. The window was maybe 12 feet away, but it might as well have been 12 miles. Still, it was movement. It was forward. It was the only direction left. Crawling to the window felt like crossing a desert. Each movement sent fresh waves of pain through my chest, but the alternative was to lie still and let Matthew's plan succeed. My surgical scar pulled tight against the bandages as I dragged myself across Elizabeth's carpet, using the legs of furniture for support. The window latch stuck, painted over years ago and rarely opened. My hands trembled as I worked at it. Sweat beaded on my forehead from the effort. When it finally gave way with a rusty squeal, the morning air hit my face like a blessing. Henry's garden stretched out below me, neat rows of tomatoes and peppers catching the early sunlight. He was kneeling between the plants, wearing his old college t-shirt and canvas work gloves, completely absorbed in checking for pests. "Henry!" My voice came out as a croak. The 2 weeks of intubation had left my throat raw, and the panic wasn't helping. "Henry! Help me!" He looked up, squinting against the sun. "Arthur? What's going on?" The relief of seeing his familiar face, of having another human being acknowledge my existence, nearly overwhelmed me. "Call an ambulance. Right now. I feel terrible." Henry dropped his trowel and stood up immediately, brushing the dirt from his knees. "What's wrong? Should I come up?" "No. I'm locked in. I can't reach my phone." The words tumbled out. I couldn't tell him about Matthew. I couldn't destroy what was left of my family's reputation in the neighborhood. But I could get help. I could survive this. "Locked in? How are you locked in your own bedroom?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. How could I explain that my son had imprisoned me? That the boy Henry had watched grow up, the one he'd congratulated on his wedding day, had turned into someone capable of elder abuse? The door jammed. I lied, hating myself for protecting Matthew even now. "Please, just call. I think it's my heart again." "I'm calling right now." "Hang on." Henry was already heading toward his house with that quick, efficient stride of a man used to handling emergencies. 15 years in the classroom had taught him to respond first and ask questions later. I clung to the windowsill, leaning out as far as my weakened body would allow. The morning air filled my lungs, cleaner than the stale atmosphere of my prison. Down below, Henry disappeared into his house, and I could see him through his kitchen window, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly as he spoke to the 911 dispatcher. Help was on the way. After an hour of abandonment, of facing the possibility that I might die alone and forgotten, real help was finally coming. But even as the relief washed over me, a new fear took hold. What would happen when the paramedics arrived? Would Matthew let them in? Would he maintain the fiction that I was fine? Just a confused old man causing trouble? He was smooth, professional, the kind of person authority figures trusted instinctively. "They're on their way," Henry shouted from his back door. "Ambulance should be here in 10 minutes. You just hang tight." 10 minutes. I could survive 10 minutes. Through the window, I watched Henry hurry back into his yard, then change his mind and walk toward the front of his property, where he could watch for the ambulance's arrival. The sight of him standing guard, this near stranger who cared more about my well-being than my own son, brought tears to my eyes. The pain in my chest had shifted, becoming more manageable, now that hope had returned. Adrenaline, probably. The body's way of keeping me conscious long enough to see the rescue arrive. But then I heard it. The sound that turned my relief to ice. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps coming up the stairs toward my room. Matthew had heard me yelling. He knew what I had done. The footsteps stopped outside my door, and I could picture him standing there, calculating his next move. How angry would he be? How far was he willing to go to protect his plan? The lock clicked. The door flew open inward with such force that it slammed against the wall. Matthew filled the doorway, his face twisted with a fury I had never seen before, not even during his worst teenage tantrums. His professional demeanor was gone, replaced by something primal and dangerous. "What did you do, you old fool?" I scrambled backward from the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Let me go. I need help." He crossed the room in 3 quick strides, grabbing me by the shoulders and hauling me upright with surprising strength. This close, I could see the panic behind his anger, the savage calculation of a man whose carefully laid plans were unraveling. "You listen to me carefully." His grip tightened, fingers digging into the area of my surgery until I gasped. "If you tell anyone about this, I will make your life a living hell. You're crazy. You're my son." "I'm your son, who has waited for his inheritance for too long." The words exploded out of him like a breaking dam. "Do you know what it's like? Watching you cling to life while Valerie and I are barely scraping by? Living in this house like you're doing us a favor?" He shoved me back onto the bed hard enough to make my teeth rattle. I landed awkwardly, a sharp pain shooting through my chest as my surgical wound twisted. Above me, Matthew loomed like a stranger in my son's face. "A favor?" I struggled to catch my breath. "This is your home. I never asked for rent. Never." "Because you wanted us dependent. Trapped." His voice rose toward hysterics. "Well, guess what, Dad? I found a way out. We found a way out." The emphasis on "we" hit like a physical blow. Valerie wasn't just complicit. She was a partner in this. The woman who had called me Dad at her wedding, who had sent me cards on every birthday, had been counting the days until my death. "How long?" The question came out as a whisper. "How long have you been planning this?" Matthew's laugh was humorless. "Since the first heart attack, when the doctor told us you might not pull through, and all I could think about was finally being free of this burden on my shoulders." He moved to the window, staring down at Henry's property with the paranoid intensity of a cornered animal. "Who did you call? What did you tell them?" "I told them I was dying. Because I am." "No!" He spun around, pointing an accusing finger at me. "You told them lies. You made yourself sound like a victim when you're just a stubborn old man who won't accept reality. The reality that my son wants me dead. The reality that you're 70 years old with a weak heart and you have no right to stop progress." His professional mask was completely gone, revealing the calculating predator underneath. "That house is worth $300,000. $300,000. Do you know what Valerie and I could do with that money?" The casual way he discussed my death, as if it were a stock transaction or a business merger, sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't temporary madness or a moment of weakness. This was who my son really was. A man who saw his father as nothing more than an inconvenient obstacle to financial success. I could change my will, I said quietly. Leave everything to charity. His face went white, then red. You wouldn't dare. Try me. For a moment I thought he might hit me. His fists clenched. His muscles tensed as he fought an internal battle between violence and calculation. Then, the sound that saved me, or damned us both, came floating through the window. Sirens. Distant, but getting closer. Matthew's head snapped toward the sound, his expression shifting from anger to panic. How long ago did you call? I didn't call anyone. Technically true. My neighbor saw me in distress. You lie. He cut himself off as the sound grew louder, clearly heading in our direction. His mind was working now, calculating odds and outcomes with the same cold precision he applied to his accounting job. Here's what's going to happen, he said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You're going to tell them you had a panic attack, that you got confused and you thought the door was locked when it wasn't. You're going to apologize for wasting their time. And if I don't, his smile held no warmth at all, then your last few years are going to be very, very unpleasant. I control your medication, your meals, your access to the outside world. If you cross me, I will make sure you understand exactly how powerless you really are. The sirens were almost here, maybe 2 blocks away. Through the window I could see Henry standing at the end of his driveway, waving them toward our house. Matthew smoothed his shirt, running his hands through his hair to restore some semblance of normalcy. Remember what I said, Dad? Every word. He moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and the door was never locked. You just forgot how to open it. Old age, you know. So confusing for everyone involved. The wail of the sirens cut through the morning air like a knife in the silence. From my position at the window, I could see the ambulance turning onto our street, its red and white lights painting urgent patterns on the suburban lawns. Relief washed over me so completely that my knees nearly buckled. But then, I saw Matthew step out the front door below, his movements quick and calculated. He had smoothed his hair, fixed his shirt, and put on that professional mask he wore so well. The concerned son, ready to handle an unfortunate misunderstanding. The ambulance pulled up to our curb with a hydraulic hiss. 2 paramedics got out, a woman in her 40s with graying hair and a younger man carrying medical gear. They moved with the efficient urgency of people used to life and death situations. Matthew intercepted them before they reached the front walk. Officers, I think there's been some kind of mistake, he said, his voice hitting that perfectly modulated tone of polite confusion. Everyone here is fine. We got a call from this address, the female paramedic replied, her eyes scanning the house methodically. Cardiac emergency, possible distress. Well, my father has been having some confusion since his surgery. Matthew's performance was flawless. The caring son, dealing with an elderly parent's declining mental state. He sometimes imagines medical emergencies that aren't real. My chest burned with a fury that temporarily overrode the physical pain. Even now, even caught in his lies, he was trying to paint me as a confused old man. I'm up here, I yelled from the window, putting every ounce of strength into my voice. 2nd floor! Help me! The paramedics looked up immediately, their professional focus zeroing in on my obvious distress. The woman stepped away from Matthew, craning her neck to get a better view. Sir, are you experiencing chest pain? She called up. Yes, and I'm locked in my room. I can't get out. Matthew's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of panic crossing his features before he regained control. He sometimes gets confused about the doorknob. Old age, you know. I'll just go up and... No. The male paramedic's voice cut through Matthew's explanation like a blade. Sir, unlock that door immediately. We need direct access to the patient. But really this isn't necessary. If you'll just let me. This isn't a request. The woman's tone had shifted from professional courtesy to absolute authority. We have a patient reporting cardiac distress and claiming to be trapped. You will either provide us with immediate access, or we will call for police backup. I watched Matthew's face cycle through a dozen expressions. Calculation, desperation, fury, resignation. He was trapped by his own lies. Trapped between his carefully constructed deceit and the immovable force of medical protocol. Of course, he said finally, his voice tight. I'll unlock the door right away. But he didn't move. He stood there for precious seconds, his mind working frantically for some way to regain control of the situation. The paramedics noticed. "Sir, unlock the door now, or we will assume this is an elder abuse situation and call the police," the woman said, her hand already moving to her radio. Elder abuse. The words hung in the air like an indictment, and I saw Matthew flinch as if he'd been slapped. His carefully constructed world of plausible deniability was crumbling in real time. "Right away," he said, but his feet remained planted on the front lawn. The male paramedic had heard enough. He spoke into his radio with concise professionalism. "Dispatch, we need police backup at this location. Possible elder abuse situation. Family member impeding access to the patient." That broke Matthew's paralysis. No, that's not necessary." He practically ran to the front door, keys jingling in his hand. "I'll open it right now." Through the window I watched him disappear into the house, and moments later I heard his footsteps on the stairs, slower than they should have been. Every step a grudging admission of defeat. The lock clicked. The door opened. "Dad." His voice carried a forced note of concern. "A performance for the audience sure to follow. The paramedics are here to check on you." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The sound of professional footsteps on the stairs, of equipment being brought up to save my life, was answer enough. When the female paramedic appeared in my doorway, her experienced eyes took it all in at once. My obvious distress, the suspicious circumstances, the locked door that I had somehow gotten confused about. "Hi, Arthur," she said gently. "I'm Sarah Lopez, and this is my partner, Michael Rogers. We're here to help." Sarah. The same name as my wife. I decided to take it as a good sign. The emergency room was a blur of bright lights and urgent voices. An oxygen mask over my face, an IV needle finding my vein with professional precision, the steady beep of machines monitoring every aspect of my failing cardiovascular system. Through it all, one thought kept circling in my mind like a predator. My own son tried to kill me. Dr. Laura Morgan showed up sometime during the second day, when the immediate crisis had passed, and I was stable enough for conversation. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-50s, with the kind of direct gaze that suggested she'd seen it all and wouldn't be easily fooled. "Arthur, your condition was critical when you arrived," she said, settling into the chair by my bed. "A little more time without treatment, and we might be having a very different conversation. Thank you for saving me." The words came out automatically, but they carried a weight I hadn't expected. Someone had cared enough to save my life when my own family had tried to end it. She nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful. The paramedics mentioned some unusual circumstances. A locked door? A family member trying to impede access? I held her gaze steadily. My son and I had a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. As if attempted murder could be boiled down to a simple family disagreement. But I wasn't ready to destroy what was left of my family's reputation. Not until I had a plan. "I see." Dr. Morgan made a note in my chart, but I caught the skeptical look she shot my way. "We'll keep you for observation. The stress on your cardiovascular system was severe, and we want to ensure there are no complications." 2 days. 2 days to lie in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, and processing the complete annihilation of everything I had believed about my son. 2 days to replay every interaction, every conversation, looking for signs I had missed. 2 days to understand that Matthew hadn't suddenly snapped. He had been calculating my death for months, maybe years. The nurses checked on me regularly, their kindness a sharp contrast to the coldness I had experienced at home. When they asked about visitors, I gave them the same answer every time. "Are there any visitors we should be expecting?" asked Sarah, the afternoon nurse, during her rounds. "No, and there won't be any." She looked surprised. "No family?" "None that matter." The phone by my bed remained silent. No calls from Matthew, asking about my condition. No flowers from Valerie, expressing concern. Just the steady rhythm of the medical equipment, and my own thoughts growing darker with every passing hour. Matthew must answer for what he did. The thought crystallized during my second night, when sleep eluded me, and the rage had settled into something colder, more resolute. This wasn't about family anymore. This was about justice. This was about ensuring that what happened to me couldn't happen to another vulnerable parent. I understood now that Matthew saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to his financial freedom. "Sensuent Megan." That's what my life was worth to him. The price of my house, minus the cost of my continued existence. But he had made one crucial mistake. He had let me live. By the morning of June 13th, I had a plan. Not the hot-headed revenge of a betrayed father, but the careful, methodical approach of a man who had spent 68 years learning how the world really worked. Matthew was smart, but he was also arrogant. He thought he was dealing with a confused old man who would either die quietly or be too ashamed to expose family secrets. He was wrong on both counts. "You're looking much better," Dr. Morgan said during her final check. "Heart rhythm is stable. Blood pressure is under control. I think we can discharge you this afternoon." "Good. I have things to take care of at home." She paused, her pen hovering over the discharge papers. "Arthur, if there are ongoing issues at home, there are resources available. Social services, elder advocacy groups." I smiled, but it wasn't a warm expression. "I can handle my family situation, doctor, but thank you." At 2 p.m., I walked out of the community hospital with a small bag of medications and a heart that was beating steady and strong. The taxi driver who picked me up was chatty, asking about my stay, remarking on the nice weather. I barely heard him. My mind was focused on the evening ahead, on the phone calls I needed to make, on the preparations that would ensure Matthew faced the consequences of his actions. The house looked exactly the same as when I'd left 3 days ago, but everything had changed. It wasn't my home anymore. It was a crime scene, and I was no longer the victim. I was the prosecutor. The taxi pulled away with a soft purr, leaving me standing on the sidewalk in front of the house that no longer felt like home. Matthew's car wasn't in the driveway. At work, most likely, pretending to be the grieving son whose father had suffered yet another medical emergency. Valerie's sedan was also missing, probably at her marketing job, maintaining the facade of normalcy. Perfect. I needed privacy for what came next. Inside, the house felt different. The same furniture, the same family photos that had been returned to their places. Guilt, perhaps, or just keeping up appearances. But the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. It was no longer a sanctuary. It was evidence of a crime. I went upstairs slowly, saving my strength, and went straight to my bedroom. The window was still open from my desperate calls for help. The carpet still held the indentation where I had collapsed, fighting for breath while my son planned my death. From my dresser drawer, I pulled out the small digital recorder I had bought years ago to capture Elizabeth's stories about her childhood. She had wanted me to preserve them for the grandchildren who would never come. Now, it would serve a very different purpose. The device was simple, a silver rectangle no bigger than a deck of cards. I tested it twice, speaking clearly into the microphone, replaying my words to ensure the audio was crisp and clear. Technology had come a long way since my working days. Next, I gathered documents. Medical records from my recent hospitalization showing the severity of my cardiac crisis. The discharge papers proving I had been in immediate danger. Dr. Morgan's notes about the unusual circumstances surrounding my emergency. But the most important call came at 3:30. Local police department. How can I help you? My name is Arthur. I need to report a case of elder abuse. The operator's voice sharpened with professional attention. What type of abuse, sir? Attempted murder. False imprisonment. My son locked me in my room during a medical emergency and refused to call for help. The words came out steady, factual, emotionless, just the way they would sound most credible. Sir, when did this occur? 3 days ago, on June 11th. I have medical documentation and witness statements available. And where are you now, sir? I'm at home. The perpetrator lives here with me. I paused, timing it. If you could send officers tonight around 7:30, I will have additional evidence for you. Additional evidence? A recorded confession, if all goes according to plan. The operator was silent for a moment. Sir, are you in any immediate danger? Not immediate, no. But if you arrive at 7:30 tonight, you will witness a crime in progress and you will have everything you need to press charges. I hung up before she could ask any more questions. Too many details would sound rehearsed, suspicious. Better to let them discover the truth as it unfolded. The recorder fit easily into my shirt pocket, the microphone positioned to capture conversation clearly. I tested the angle several times, recording myself from different positions around the room, replaying each attempt until I was satisfied with the audio quality. At 6 p.m., I heard Matthew's car in the driveway. Showtime. I settled into the living room armchair. My armchair, the one he had claimed during my hospital stay. And I waited. The front door opened with its familiar squeak. "Dad?" His voice carried a note of surprise. "You're home? Where else would I be?" He appeared in the living room entryway, still in his business suit, his face carefully composed into an expression of mild concern. The performance was flawless, if you didn't know what to look for. "How are you feeling? The hospital said you were stable, but stable enough to have some interesting conversations." I kept my voice level, almost conversational, about inheritances, about burdens, about sons who wait for their fathers to die. His mask slipped, just slightly. A tightness around his eyes, a pause that lasted one beat too long. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." I smiled, and I saw him recognize something new in my expression, something that hadn't been there before his betrayal. "We both know exactly what you did. The only question is whether you're man enough to admit it." Through the window I could see a police cruiser turn onto our street, moving slowly, professionally, timing its arrival with the precision I had requested. Matthew followed my gaze, and he froze. "What did you do?" he whispered. I reached into my shirt pocket and turned off the recorder. "Justice, son. Something you forgot to teach yourself." At 6:30 on the dot, I heard the familiar rumble of Matthew's sedan pulling into the driveway, then Valerie's car, its engine ticking as it cooled. The car doors shut with the casual authority of people returning to their domain, unaware that the rules had changed in their absence. The front door opened with its usual squeak, the same sound that had welcomed me home from work for 37 years, back when this house held love instead of lies. "Dad?" Matthew's voice carried that careful note of false concern he had perfected over the last few days. "You're home already." I remained seated in my armchair. My armchair, not his. My hands folded calmly in my lap. The recorder in my shirt pocket felt warm against my chest, its tiny red light hidden but recording every word. "This is my house, son." He appeared in the living room entryway, still in his business suit, that mask of professional competence firmly in place. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes darted around the room as if searching for threats. "What were you thinking, checking out of the hospital so soon?" the doctors said. The doctors discharged me. I kept my voice level, conversational, a clean bill of health. It's amazing what surviving an attempted murder can do for a man's constitution. His face went white, then red. "That's not what happened, and you know it." "Oh, yes." I smiled, feeling the power shift that had been building for 3 days finally take hold. "Refresh my memory, Matthew. What exactly happened when you locked me in my room and refused to call for help while I was dying?" "You were confused. The door wasn't locked. You just couldn't." Sancho and man. The number dropped into the silence like a stone in still water. "That's what you said my house was worth. That's what you and Valerie had been planning to get." Behind him, Valerie appeared in the hallway, grocery bags in her arms. She took one look at the unfolding scene and quickly disappeared toward the kitchen. Smart woman, too smart to get caught in the crossfire when her husband's world caved in. "You don't know what you're talking about," Matthew said, but his voice had lost its professional polish. Raw desperation was seeping through. "I know exactly what I'm talking about." I leaned forward slightly, watching him flinch. "I know you've been waiting for me to die. I know you see me as nothing but an obstacle to your financial freedom. I know you're willing to commit murder to get what you want." "Shut up." The words came out low and dangerous. "Just shut up, old man." "Perfect." The recorder was catching every syllable. "Okay," I pushed further, feeling the satisfaction of a man who had finally stopped being afraid. "Will you lock me up again? Will you try to finish what you started?" "I should have let you die!" The explosion came exactly as I'd hoped. Raw, honest, completely incriminating. "Do you have any idea what it's like? Watching you cling to life while we're stuck in this house like prisoners? Waiting for you to finally do us all a favor and drop dead?" I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. The recorder was getting every word of this confession, every admission of guilt that would seal his fate. "But you didn't let me die, did you?" I said quietly. "Because you're a coward, Matthew. You wanted me dead, but you didn't have the guts to do it yourself. You just hoped nature would take its course while you played innocent." "Innocent?" He laughed. A harsh, humorless sound. I've been innocent my whole life, obedient son, good student, responsible adult. And what has it gotten me? Stuck in my father's house at 42 years old, depending on your charity, waiting for scraps from your table. So you decided to take the whole meal. I decided to take what should have been mine years ago. His professional facade was completely gone, replaced by the ugly reality underneath. You had your time, Dad, your house, your life, your decisions. Now it's my turn. Through the window, I saw a flicker of movement on the street. Right on time. Your turn. I stood up slowly, my body steady and strong. Despite everything he had put me through, let me tell you whose turn it really is. Son. The doorbell rang. Matthew spun toward the sound, confusion replacing the anger on his face. Who could that be? I reached into my shirt pocket and turned off the recorder. Its job was done. Justice. Matthew. Something you seem to have forgotten about. The doorbell rang again, followed by 3 sharp knocks that carried the unmistakable authority of the law. Matthew's face went from confusion to understanding to sheer panic in a matter of seconds. What did you do? He whispered. I walked to the front door with steady steps, my heart beating strong and sure. Through the peephole I could see 2 officers in local police uniforms, a woman in her 40s with sergeant's stripes, and a younger man with kind eyes and a serious expression. Arthur? The officer asked when I opened the door. I'm Sergeant Ellen Vargas. This is Officer David Romero. We received your call about an elder abuse situation. Yes, I called you. I stepped aside to let them in. I have proof. Behind me, I heard Matthew's sharp intake of breath, the sound of a man realizing he's walked into a carefully laid trap. Proof? Sergeant Vargas's professional gaze took in the scene. The comfortable living room, the well-dressed son who looked like he'd seen a ghost, the elderly father radiating a calm determination. I reached into my shirt pocket and pulled out the small silver recorder. Recorded confession, threats of violence, admission of attempted murder through medical neglect. That's not. Matthew started to move forward, then stopped when Officer Romero's hand moved toward his belt. Let's hear it, Sergeant Vargas said. I pressed the play button. Matthew's voice filled the room, clear and damning. I should have let you die. Do you have any idea what it's like, watching you cling to life while we're stuck in this house like prisoners? The color drained from Matthew's face as his own words condemned him. That's taken out of context. He was provoking me. Keep listening, I said quietly. I decided to take what should have been mine years ago. You had your time, Dad. Now it's my turn. Sergeant Vargas exchanged a look with her partner. 20 years on, the force had taught her to recognize genuine evidence when she heard it. Sir, can you tell us what happened on June 11th? Officer Romero asked, his notebook out. My son locked me in my bedroom during a cardiac emergency and refused to call for medical help, I said, my voice steady and factual. He admitted he wanted me to die so he could inherit my house. He's lying, Matthew's voice cracked with desperation. He's a confused old man who doesn't understand what really happened. We have the paramedics' report, Sergeant Vargas said, consulting her notes. EMS documented a locked door and a family member attempting to impede medical access. That matches the gentleman's account. From the kitchen doorway, Valerie appeared, holding a suitcase. She had been listening, and she had made her choice. Officers, I can confirm my husband's behavior, she said, her voice trembling. I tried to stop him, but he said it would be better if Arthur just died naturally. Matthew spun toward her, betrayal written across his features. Valerie, what are you doing? What I should have done 3 days ago, she looked at me, with something that might have been remorse. I'm sorry, Arthur. I should have protected you. Officer Romero stepped forward, handcuffs already in his hand. Matthew, you are under arrest for elder abuse, false imprisonment, and conspiracy to commit harm to a vulnerable adult. You have the right to remain silent, Sergeant Vargas continued as her partner secured the cuffs. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. I watched my son, my only son, the child I had raised and loved and supported, as he was read his rights in the living room where he had once opened Christmas presents and celebrated birthdays. The weight of it should have crushed me, but instead, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. This isn't over, Matthew yelled as he was led toward the door. I'm your son, your only family. No, I said quietly, but loud enough for him to hear. My son would never have tried to kill me for money. I don't know who you are. The door closed behind them with a soft click, taking with it the last remnants of the family I thought I knew. Valerie stood in the hallway with her suitcase. Tears were streaming down her face. "I'll be gone by morning," she said. "Divorce papers will be filed by the end of the week." I nodded. "That's probably for the best." She paused at the door. "He wasn't always like this, you know. Greed consumed him, I know. And I did know. Somewhere inside that angry, desperate man was the boy who had once hugged me after every Little League game, win or lose. But that boy was gone, replaced by someone I couldn't save and wouldn't try to. The house fell quiet around me, but it wasn't the terrifying silence of abandonment. It was the blessed stillness of justice served and truth acknowledged. For the first time in months, I was truly alone. And it felt like freedom. 17 days later, I stood at the same window where I had once desperately called for help, but now I was looking out at a future I had chosen for myself. The for sale sign on my front lawn caught the morning sunlight, a symbol of the new life I was building from the ashes of the old one. The legal process had moved with surprising speed. Matthew's plea deal included 2 years of probation, community service, and a permanent restraining order forbidding him from contacting me. The elder abuse conviction would follow him for the rest of his life. A fitting consequence for a man who had forgotten that family meant protection, not predation. "Justice is done," I said to the empty room, and the words felt true in a way that satisfied something deep in my soul. My phone rang, breaking the peaceful silence. My lawyer's voice was crisp and professional. "Arthur, the new will is finalized. Your son is no longer an heir, and the proceeds from the house sale will fund your new living arrangements, plus a substantial charitable donation to the Society for the Prevention of Elder Abuse." "Thank you, Lisa. That feels right." After hanging up, I walked through the rooms that had witnessed both love and betrayal. The house would sell quickly. 3 bedrooms in a good neighborhood, newly updated kitchen, no family drama to complicate the transaction. The real estate agent had been impressed by how clean and organized everything looked. I had spent the last 2 weeks methodically removing every trace of Matthew and Valerie's presence. Their belongings were in storage boxes, waiting to be picked up. I wouldn't throw their lives away the way they had tried to discard mine, but I wouldn't keep reminders of their betrayal either. The assisted living community I had chosen was modern, bright, and full of people who understood that getting older didn't mean giving up. My deposit was paid, my move-in date set for next month. For the first time in years, I was excited about the future. A knock on the door broke my planning. Through the window, I could see Henry standing on my porch, holding a foil-covered dish. "How are things holding up, Arthur?" he asked when I opened the door. "Better than ever, Henry. Much better." His smile was warm with genuine affection. "Sandra made too much beef stew again. Thought you might enjoy some." I accepted the dish gratefully. In the weeks since Matthew's arrest, Henry had become a true friend, stopping by for coffee, helping with small repairs, treating me like the family I should have had all along. "Would you like to come in?" "Can't stay long, but sure." He settled into the chair that used to be Matthew's domain. "Read in the paper that your son was sentenced. That must be tough." "It was the right thing," I said simply. Sometimes, doing the right thing means letting go of what we thought we wanted. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. 2 old men who understood that friendship was about presence, not conversation. Through the window, I could see kids playing on the street, their laughter drifting on the summer breeze. "You know," Henry said finally, "there's a poker game at the community center on Thursday nights. Bunch of veterans trying to remember how to bluff. Interested?" I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. I'd love that. After he left, I walked through the house one last time, saying goodbye to the memories worth keeping and releasing the ones that had only brought pain. In 6 weeks, someone else would call this place home. Someone who would fill it with laughter instead of lies, with love instead of resentment. The afternoon sun streamed through the living room window, warming the space where I had once fought for my life, and won something more valuable than survival. I had won back my dignity, my agency, and my right to choose how my story would end. My phone vibrated with a text from the residence director. "Your apartment is ready whenever you are. Welcome to your new chapter," I replied. "See you soon, ready to start." Outside, a cardinal landed on the windowsill, its red feathers bright against the glass. Elizabeth always said cardinals were messengers, signs that loved ones were watching over us. Whether it was true or not, I decided to take it as a good omen. At 68 years old, I was starting over. Not because I had to, but because I had learned that it's never too late to demand better from life, to refuse to accept cruelty disguised as family, to fight for justice even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted. The house around me felt peaceful now, no longer haunted by betrayal, but blessed by the knowledge that truth had triumphed over manipulation, that courage had defeated cowardice, that one old man could still be strong enough to save himself. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new possibilities, new reasons to keep choosing hope over bitterness. But today, in this moment, I was exactly where I belonged, free, vindicated, and ready for whatever came next. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to William's Revenge Stories, and share your thoughts on this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for your attention.